Dorie, so great to be here in Miami with you.
Richard, it's so great to be with you. Thanks for having me.
Pleasure. And I realized that the first book that you wrote, the one that really changed my life in this journey from corruption to compliance, was Reinventing You. And I also realized it's the one book that you've written that I don't have autographed. So if you don't mind, I would really appreciate your signature.
Absolutely, and of course, this is a great one to sign. Although next time we've got to do the paperback edition,
right,
which you're the star of the preface. So I was so honored to be able to feature you in the second edition of the book.
Thank you so much for that.
Thank you, but I'd love to sign it.
Thanks for the autograph. And just by way of background, before I went to prison, I'm like, okay, what kind of books do I want to read? And I might have Googled and did a search for Reinventing Me. So Reinventing You popped up, and it really took me from despair to hope. And maybe you can share a little bit about why you wrote Reinventing You and why over a decade later, it's still an important work.
Yeah, well, thank you, Richard. I mean, I wrote Reinventing You because for me, in my 20s, I basically, I guess one way to say it is like, I couldn't catch a break. But another way to say it is, I just kept failing. I tried a lot of different careers. I wanted to be an academic. I didn't get into my doctoral programs. I wanted to be a journalist. I was for a while, and then I got laid off and I couldn't get hired again. So I reinvented myself into working in politics, and all my candidates lost. And at a certain point, I'm just like, why, God? And I started over time looking around at other exemplars of reinvention. I felt totally unprepared to reinvent myself. I just was flailing. I was figuring it out as I went. And I thought there has to be a more systematic way of doing it. There has to be a better way. Other people have done this before. And so I wanted to codify that so that it could be easier in the future for other people. So there was a little bit of a roadmap. So eventually I started writing for Harvard Business Review, and this became my first book. But it's so meaningful to me that someone who was in an even more fraught position was able to use the book and to find it helpful.
Well, thank you. So from a mindset perspective, what are some of the questions that someone might ask themselves that's not sitting in federal prison, but maybe mid-career development? What are some of the things that they should think about if this is a good time in their career for reinvention?
So there's a distinction that I draw in the book, which is what I call capital R reinvention and then lowercase r reinvention. And so the capital R is, sort of the big splashy thing. I'm changing careers, or I'm finally doing the thing I always wanted to do. Or, as happened to me, oh my God, I'm getting laid off, and what do I do about it? So it's very stark, it's very dramatic. There's not a choice. You have to reinvent yourself. The lowercase r reinvention is much more subtle. And this is the one that a lot of people miss, because for a lot of us, honestly, it's a lot easier to just coast, to not really think about it, do your thing. And the problem is that oftentimes you keep going, and then you hit a wall and you realize, oh boy, I could have prepared for this better, but somehow I didn't. And so part of what I'm trying to accomplish in writing Reinventing You is to encourage more people to make lowercase r reinvention, sort of the daily habits, the practices, more of a way of life. Because if you do that regularly, then it actually is a preventative measure. That means that you almost never have to have the big, stark, tumultuous moments where you're saying, oh wow, I'm so unprepared for this. If we make it a mindset, if we make it a habit that, you know what, I want to keep growing, I want to keep learning new things, then it's not so stressful.
So do you have any resources where someone can think about what are the little R's I should think about, other than reading this entire book, which is amazing, as an aside?
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. Certainly one microdose of it actually is I do have a free resource, which is the Reinventing You self-assessment. You can get it for free. It's a checklist. It's just go to dorieclark.com/reinvent, and you can download that for free. But what I'll say in general, if people are thinking about how to reinvent themselves and looking for small ways to do it, is to really ask yourself, what are almost small interstitial moments that I can repurpose? So for instance, I mean, a very small change would be, instead of listening to music at the gym, maybe you start listening to audiobooks, you start listening to podcasts in your field or something along those lines. That gives you an hour, depending how much you work out, 5 hours a week of content knowledge that you wouldn't get otherwise. Another great one to sort of bring into your practice is, and you do have to be kind of disciplined about it, is networking and saying, okay, I'm going to reach out to people, I'm going to make the ask, but once a week to have coffee with someone to just keep your network fresh and alive. Because in Reinventing You, I actually profile a guy named Dan who found himself in a tricky position because he woke up one day, he'd worked at the same company for 10 years, and he realized, oh my God, everyone I know is at this company. And it's fine for what it is, but if anything changed, if he ever wanted to leave or had to leave, it's a pretty precarious position because you don't have a lot of help or resources outside of it. So keeping your network fresh is a small discipline that can pay very big dividends.
Yeah, I never really thought about the small R because that's a continuous process, isn't it?
Yeah.
To just always be challenging yourself.
Yeah, that's right. And it's reinvention sounds so daunting when it has to be a big thing. But if it's just a kind of regular activity, then eventually you don't even notice because it becomes just the way that you do business.
Yeah. Well, I'm adding again, this is the book that brought me from a journey from corruption to compliance. It was a life changer. Now I need to get back into small R. So thanks for this talk. And depending where you're seeing this video, I'm going to point up or down because we're going to have all those resources here for you. Dorie, thank you so much for your time. It's great to see you again.
Richard, it's so good to see you. And I just want to say you're such an inspiration and such an exemplification of the principles of Reinventing You. I mean, for me, I think one of the most important parts is that a lot of times, whether you have a story as dramatic as, having been in prison and then reinventing yourself, or as non-dramatic as, oh, I was in HR, but now I want to go into sales. Sometimes people feel that they need to somehow paper over their background, that it's a liability, that they can't talk about it, that they're embarrassed, that they feel bad, that they have spent time or, in their minds, wasted time doing their previous thing and that it's not relevant. But the truth is, all of what we've done, all of what's brought us here is relevant. And if we can marshal that and own it and talk about it and feel proud of what we've learned and bring that to the table, it puts us in such a position of strength and it helps us differentiate ourselves. And I think you really have lived into that. And I think it's a powerful lesson for everyone in Reinvention that the things you have done in the past are not wasted. Even if they're different than where you're going, you have knowledge that other people don't. And you can bring it to bear, and it's what makes you unique, and it's what makes you valuable.
Yeah, it's one thing that I learned from the book. We all have chapters in our lives that we're less, I don't know, for lack of a better term, proud of than others. I mean, going to federal prison is a big not proud of. But still, I learned through Reinventing You, if you're transparent about it, then people can see you for who you are, like the good, the bad, and the ugly. And then you don't ever have to worry about something rearing its ugly head because that's part of the process, is the transparency.
That's right. I mean, I want us all to live lives with no stress. It's you never have to worry oh my gosh, people are whispering about you. Do you know about Richard? It's like, so what? Richard told me, whatever. And you own it and you control the narrative. And there is such power in that. It takes so much psychological energy to worry about what other people are thinking about you or to feel like you need to triangulate that. That's true whether somebody's been in prison, whether somebody is gay and they're worried that the people know that about them, or whether, as in the case of a woman I profiled on Reinventing You, she started as a poet and she became a management consultant and she was worried that no one would take her seriously because she had started as a poet. We all have scripts in our heads and to be able to move past that and just say, yeah, that's me. It just neutralizes everything and it gives you so much control back in your life.
Yeah, it's emotive and it's practical as well. Super. Well, Dorie, thanks again. I'm just going to keep talking and asking questions, so I guess you just have to read the book to find more of them.
Thanks, Richard.
Super.
Take care.
Thank you.